I still remember the exact moment my future shattered into pieces. It was a warm June afternoon, just 2 weeks after my high school graduation. The golden acceptance letter from Berkeley sat proudly on my desk, representing everything I had worked for throughout my high school years. The countless late nights studying, the student council leadership roles, the volunteer hours at the local hospital, all of it had paid off. Berkeley had not only accepted me, but offered a partial scholarship. The remaining tuition would come from the college fund my parents had been building since I was born. At least, that's what I thought. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. I was in my room, creating a vision board for my dorm when I heard raised voices from downstairs. My parents rarely argued, so naturally I crept toward the staircase, curiosity getting the better of me. That's when I heard it, the sentence that would change everything. "Emma deserves this chance, Richard. We can't just empty her college fund for Tyler's business venture." My mother's voice was strained, higher pitched than normal. My father's response came quick and dismissive. "Tyler has a real opportunity here, Catherine. Emma can take out loans like normal kids. She's smart. She'll figure it out." My heart stopped. Were they talking about my college fund? The money that had been promised to me my entire life? I stood frozen at the top of the stairs, trying to process what I'd just heard. My parents were discussing giving my college fund, my future, to my older brother Tyler for some business idea. The same Tyler who had dropped out of 3 different colleges and jumped from one get-rich-quick scheme to another for the past 5 years. Gathering my courage, I descended the stairs. My parents fell silent the moment they saw me, guilt flashing across both their faces. The 3 of us stood in our kitchen, the afternoon sunlight streaming through the windows, creating an atmosphere that should have been warm and comforting. Instead, tension filled the air. "Is it true?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "Are you giving my college fund to Tyler?" My mother looked away, unable to meet my eyes. My father, always the pragmatist, straightened his shoulders. "Emma, honey, we need to discuss some changes to our financial plans," he began, using his lawyer voice, the one reserved for difficult clients. "Your brother has an incredible investment opportunity that could set him up for life. It requires capital that he doesn't have right now. And my college fund is just available?" The words felt bitter on my tongue. "It's not like that," my mother interjected, finally finding her voice. "We're just reallocating some resources temporarily. Tyler will pay it back once his business takes off." I laughed then, a hollow sound that surprised even me. Just like, he paid back the money for his music studio equipment, or the food truck venture, or the cryptocurrency investment. Each failed endeavor of Tyler's hung in the air between us. My father's expression hardened. "That's enough, Emma. This is different. Tyler has matured, and this opportunity is solid. Sometimes in families, sacrifices need to be made." "But why am I the only one sacrificing?" I shot back, tears threatening to spill. "I've done everything right. Perfect grades, extracurriculars, community service. I got into Berkeley. And now you're telling me that was all for nothing because Tyler has another brilliant idea?" "Don't be dramatic," my father sighed. "You can still go to State University. It's perfectly adequate, and with your grades, you might qualify for additional scholarships." State University, not Berkeley, not my dream school that I had worked tirelessly to get into. My plans, my future, all altered because my brother needed yet another chance. "Tyler is family," my mother added softly, "and he needs this opportunity. We have to support each other." That's when the most painful realization hit me. This wasn't about family supporting each other. This was about Tyler always coming first. It had always been that way. His needs, his dreams, his failures prioritized over anything I achieved or desired. I looked at both my parents, really looked at them, and for the first time in my 18 years, I saw the truth. "You've always favored him," I said quietly. "No matter what I accomplish, it will never be as important as whatever Tyler wants." My father's face flushed with anger. "That's ridiculous. We've always supported both of you equally." "Equally?" I challenged, finding strength in the truth. "When Tyler got a C in geometry, you hired a private tutor. When I got my first B+ in AP Physics, you told me to study harder. When Tyler couldn't decide on a major, you paid for him to find himself in Europe for a summer. When I wanted to attend that journalism workshop in Chicago, you said it was too expensive." My mother looked pained. "Emma, that's not fair. The circumstances were different." "Yes, they were," I agreed. "The circumstances have always been different because it's Tyler. And now you're taking away my future to fund his 5th chance at success." "We're not taking away your future," my father insisted. "There are other options. Student loans that I'll be paying off for decades," I interrupted. "While Tyler gets a free ride, again." My father threw his hands up in exasperation. "The decision has been made, Emma. The money has already been transferred to Tyler's business account. He needed it immediately to secure the investment." Worlds seemed to tilt beneath my feet. They had already done it, without discussing it with me, without even having the decency to warn me before I spent the past 2 weeks planning for a future that was no longer possible. "When were you planning to tell me?" I asked, my voice surprisingly steady despite the storm raging inside me. My parents exchanged uncomfortable glances. "We thought it would be better to wait until Tyler's deal was finalized," my mother admitted. "We didn't want to upset you unnecessarily if it all worked out quickly." Translated, they hoped Tyler's business would magically succeed overnight, he'd return the money, and I'd never need to know they had gambled with my future. The sheer audacity of their plan left me speechless. Just then, the front door burst open, and Tyler strolled in, keys jangling in his hand. At 23, my brother had our father's height and our mother's easy charm, a combination that had helped him talk his way out of consequences his entire life. "Hey, what's with the family meeting?" he asked, glancing between our tense faces. Then his eyes landed on me and understanding dawned. Oh, I repeated. "That's all you have to say? You took my college fund and all you can say is, oh?" Tyler had the grace to look slightly ashamed. "Emma, it's not like that. This is a legitimate business opportunity. Premium craft beers with locally sourced ingredients. The market research." "I don't care about your market research," I exploded. "That was my money for my education. Money that Mom and Dad saved for me since I was born." Tyler looked to our parents for support. As always, my father stepped in to defend him. "Emma, that's enough. Tyler didn't take anything. Your mother and I made this decision as the parents. It's our money to allocate as we see fit." Those words, "our money," were the final betrayal. For 18 years, they had told me that fund was for my education. For 18 years, I had made choices based on that promise. And now, in an instant, they had changed the rules. I looked at my family standing before me, my father defensive, my mother guilty, my brother entitled. And something inside me shifted. A lifetime of being the good daughter, the responsible one, the one who never caused trouble while Tyler burned through second chances like matches. It all seemed pointless now. "Fine," I said, the word cutting through the tension like a knife. "It's your money. Do whatever you want with it." "Emma," my mother started, reaching toward me. I stepped back. "No, you've made your choice clear. Tyler comes first. He always has." "That's not true," my father insisted, but the protest sounded hollow even to him. I turned to leave the kitchen, needing space to think, to breathe, to figure out what came next. As I reached the doorway, Tyler called after me. "Em, I promise this time it's different. I'll pay you back double once the brewery takes off. You'll see." I paused but didn't turn around. "No, Tyler, I won't see. Because this is the last time I'll be disappointed by any of you." As I climbed the stairs back to my room, to the vision board now rendered meaningless, to the Berkeley acceptance letter now just a cruel joke, a strange calm settled over me. This wasn't just about the money. It was about finally seeing my family clearly, without the filter of obligation or hope coloring my perception. Sitting on my bed, I gazed around my room at the evidence of the person I'd been. The honor roll, certificates, the debate team trophies, the volunteer service awards. I had built my identity around being the perfect daughter, the one who never caused problems, the one who made my parents proud to balance out Tyler's disappointments. But what had that gotten me? A betrayal so profound it had altered the course of my life. My phone buzzed with a text from my best friend Zoe. "Dorm shopping tomorrow?" I'm thinking fairy lights and one of those tapestry things. Zoe was headed to UCLA in the fall. We had planned to visit each other, two California girls taking on the world. Another plan now in jeopardy. I stared at her message, tears finally spilling onto my cheeks. I couldn't afford Berkeley without that fund. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Student loans would only cover so much, and the partial scholarship wouldn't be enough. State University might be perfectly adequate, as my father had so dismissively put it, but it didn't offer the journalism program I had my heart set on. As night fell, I lay in bed, staring at my ceiling, the course of my life seemingly decided for me. But as the hours passed, something unexpected began to take root inside me. Not just anger or hurt, but determination. A fierce, burning resolve that whispered, "If they won't help me build my future, I'll build it myself." By morning, that whisper had grown into a shout. I didn't need their money. I didn't need their approval. And most importantly, I didn't need to follow the path they'd laid out for me. When dawn broke, I knew exactly what I needed to do. My parents had always defined success in conventional terms: prestigious degrees, stable careers, financial security. But there were other ways to succeed, other paths to follow. I reached for my phone and texted Zoe. "Change of plans, need to talk. Can you come over?" Whatever came next, I knew one thing for certain. My parents had given my college fund to my brother, but they had no idea what I would achieve without their help. And when they found out, it would be the last thing they ever expected. 3 days after discovering my parents' betrayal, I sat across from them at our dining room table, a folder of papers in front of me. The atmosphere was tense. We'd barely spoken since our argument, communicating only in terse, necessary exchanges. Tyler had conveniently made himself scarce, already busy with his brewery plans. "What's this about, Emma?" my father asked, eyeing the folder with suspicion. I took a deep breath. "I've made some decisions about my future, and I wanted to inform you both." My mother looked nervous. "We hope you've had time to think things through. We know you're disappointed." "Disappointed doesn't begin to cover it," I interrupted, keeping my voice steady. "But that's not what this conversation is about. This is about what comes next." I opened the folder and slid several papers across the table. "I've deferred my acceptance to Berkeley for 1 year." My parents exchanged surprised glances. My father reached for the deferment confirmation. "Emma, if this is some kind of protest?" "It's not a protest, Dad. It's a plan." I pulled out another document. "I've been accepted into the Digital Nomad Academy's year-long web development and content creation program." My father's brow furrowed as he scanned the document. "What is this? Some online course?" "Emma, this isn't a real education." It's an intensive coding boot camp combined with digital marketing and content creation training, I explained, keeping my voice professional despite the anger simmering beneath. The program has a 93% job placement rate for graduates and partnerships with tech companies across the country. But Berkeley, my mother said weakly, your journalism degree, that's been your dream. Dreams change when circumstances change, I replied. You made sure of that. My father's face hardened. And how exactly do you plan to pay for this program? I smiled then, the first genuine smile I'd managed in days. That's the best part. I don't have to pay anything up front. The academy operates on an income share agreement. They cover the costs, and I pay a percentage of my income after I graduate and find employment. If I don't find a job in the field within 6 months of completion, I owe nothing. This sounds too good to be true, my father said dismissively. What's the catch? The catch is that it's incredibly selective. They only accept 50 students per cohort from thousands of applicants. I couldn't keep a hint of pride from my voice. I submitted my application the morning after our discussion. They fast-tracked my interview because of my coding projects from the Girls Who Code summer program I did last year. You know, the one you said was a nice hobby, but not a real career path. My mother reached for my hand across the table. Emma, honey, we're just concerned. Taking a year off from traditional education is risky. What if this doesn't work out? I gently pulled my hand away. Then I'll figure something else out. But I'm done expecting help from either of you. That's not fair, my father protested. We've always supported you. Until you didn't, I replied simply. Until something else, someone else became more important. My father's face flushed. This isn't about favorites, Emma. It's about allocation of resources. Tyler's opportunity. I don't want to hear about Tyler's opportunity, I cut him off. Not when it came at the expense of mine. I stood up, gathering my papers. The program starts in 3 weeks. It's remote for the first 2 months, then relocates to their campus in Austin for the remaining 10 months. Austin? My mother looked shocked. You're moving to Texas? Housing is provided as part of the program, I explained, having anticipated their objections. And before you ask, I've already spoken with Aunt Diane. She's offered to let me stay with her for the 2 weeks between moving out of here and starting at the campus. My father stood up, his lawyer persona fully engaged now. You're 18, Emma. Legally an adult, yes. But this is a rash decision made out of anger. I strongly advise against this course of action. I looked at him squarely. Your advice is noted, Dad. But so is the fact that when it came down to it, you chose Tyler over me. You chose his 5th chance over my first one. That tells me everything I need to know about how much I should value your opinion of my choices. My mother began to cry silently, tears sliding down her cheeks. Emma, please. We're still a family. Don't do this. For a moment, her tears almost swayed me. I had spent my entire life trying not to upset my parents, trying to be the easy child since Tyler took up so much of their emotional energy. But something had fundamentally shifted inside me. I'm not doing anything to you, I said gently. I'm doing something for myself. For once, I'm choosing my own path instead of following the one you laid out for me. Isn't that what you raised me to do? To be independent? To solve my own problems? Not like this, my father said, his voice softer now. Not by cutting us out. I shook my head. I'm not cutting you out. I'm just not counting on you anymore. There's a difference. A heavy silence fell over the dining room. Through the window, I could see our backyard, the swing set my father had built when Tyler and I were children still standing in the corner. How simple everything had seemed back then. So that's it? My mother finally asked. You've made up your mind? Yes, I replied. I leave in 2 weeks. My father sat back down heavily. And what about Berkeley? Your scholarship? As I said, I've deferred for a year. If the digital nomad program doesn't work out, Berkeley will still be an option, though I'll have to find a way to pay for it myself. I gathered my documents, tucking them neatly back into the folder. But something tells me I won't be going back to that plan. As I turned to leave the dining room, my father called after me. "Emma, wait. What if we try to get some of your college fund back from Tyler? Maybe not all of it, but enough to help with Berkeley." I paused in the doorway, considering his offer. It was tempting, a partial victory, a recognition of their mistake. But I knew Tyler well enough to understand that the money was likely already spent or committed. And more importantly, the offer missed the point entirely. "It's not about the money anymore, Dad," I said quietly. "It's about the fact that you and Mom didn't think twice about sacrificing my future for Tyler's present. It's about the pattern that's existed my entire life that I was too blind to see clearly until now. Getting some of the money back wouldn't change that fundamental truth." My mother sobbed harder, and my father looked older than I'd ever seen him. For a brief moment, I felt guilty for causing them pain. But then I remembered the casual way they had dismissed my dreams, the easy assumption that I would simply adjust to their decision without protest. "I'll be in my room packing," I said, my voice softening slightly. "There's a lot to sort through." As I climbed the stairs to my bedroom, I felt lighter somehow, as if the confrontation had released a burden I'd been carrying for years. The burden of seeking approval from parents who would always prioritize my brother. The path ahead was uncertain and nothing like what I had planned, but for the first time, it was truly mine. In my room, I looked at the Berkeley acceptance letter, still on my desk, running my fingers over the embossed logo. Then I pinned it to my bulletin board, not as a plan to return to, but as a reminder of what had brought me to this turning point. Beside it, I pinned my acceptance to the Digital Nomad Academy, the future I had chosen for myself. My phone buzzed with a text from Zoe. "How did it go? Are you okay?" I typed back, "Better than expected. Leaving in 2 weeks. Freedom feels terrifying, but right." As I began sorting through my belongings, deciding what to take and what to leave behind, I realized I was not just packing for a year away. I was packing for a completely different life than the one I had imagined, a life built entirely on my own terms. The 2 weeks before my departure passed in a strange limbo. Our house, once comfortable and familiar, now felt like a hotel I was merely passing through. My parents attempted several more conversations, each following the same pattern: expressions of concern about my decision, offers to figure something out financially that always fell short of actually retrieving my college fund from Tyler, and thinly veiled suggestions that I was overreacting. Tyler himself made only brief appearances, always with an anxious glance in my direction, before quickly retreating to the safety of his room or out the door to business meetings. The one time he attempted to speak with me directly, I was sorting through old books in my bedroom. "Hey, Em," he said, lingering awkwardly in my doorway. "Got a minute?" I didn't look up, continuing to separate novels into keep and donate piles. "Depends on what you need." He stepped into my room, hands shoved deep in his pockets. "Look, I know you're upset." "Upset doesn't cover it," I interjected, finally meeting his gaze. Tyler sighed, running a hand through his hair in the nervous gesture he'd had since childhood. "I get it. I do. But this opportunity, Em, it's not like the others. The market research is solid. We've got distribution channels lined up, and the master brewer we've partnered with trained in Germany." I set down the book in my hand. "Is this supposed to make me feel better? That you stole my future for a really promising beer business?" "I didn't steal," he began defensively, then caught himself. "I didn't come here to argue. I wanted to show you something." Tyler pulled out his phone and pulled up a document, then handed it to me. It was a legal agreement, naming me as a 5% equity holder in Horizon Craft Brewing, LLC. "What's this?" I asked, scrolling through the document. "I want you to be part of this," Tyler explained, his voice earnest. 5% might not sound like much, but when this takes off, it could be worth way more than your college fund. Plus, I've written in that you get prioritized profit distribution until you've recouped the equivalent of your college fund, plus interest. I handed the phone back to him, a hollow laugh escaping me. "So your solution isn't to give me back what was rightfully mine, but to make me an unwilling investor in your latest scheme." Tyler's face fell. "It's not a scheme, Emma. I'm trying to make this right." "No," I said firmly. "You're trying to ease your conscience without actually sacrificing anything. You get to keep my money, pursue your dream, and if by some miracle it succeeds, you get to play the hero who took care of his little sister." "That's not fair," he protested. "None of this is fair," I replied. "But at least I'm being honest about it." I turned back to my books, effectively dismissing him. After a moment of strained silence, Tyler left, leaving his offer hanging in the air between us. Later that night, unable to sleep, I found myself in our backyard, sitting on the old swing set and staring up at the stars. The metal chains creaked softly as I swayed back and forth, my feet dragging in the dirt beneath. I thought I might find you out here. My mother's voice startled me. She approached slowly, as if afraid I might flee, before settling onto the swing beside mine. For several minutes, we sat in silence, the chirping of crickets the only sound between us. "Your father and I used to bring you out here when you couldn't sleep as a toddler," she finally said. "The motion of the swing was the only thing that would calm you down." I said nothing, continuing to gaze upward at the night sky. "Emma," my mother began hesitantly, "I know you think we favor Tyler, but it's more complicated than that." "Then explain it to me," I challenged quietly. "Explain how taking everything from me to give to him is anything but favoritism." My mother sighed deeply. "Tyler has always struggled. From school to relationships to finding his place in the world, nothing has ever come easily to him. But you," she turned to look at me, "you've always been exceptional. Everything you touch turns to gold. You're smart, disciplined, determined." "So I'm being punished for my success," I concluded bitterly. No, she protested. "It's just, we've always known you'd be okay no matter what. You have something special, Emma. A fire inside you that Tyler doesn't have. We really believed that you would find a way, even without the fund. But Tyler, without this chance?" She trailed off, unable to finish. A realization washed over me, cold and clarifying. You and Dad made a choice based on who you thought needed you more, not based on who deserved it. My mother didn't deny it. "We never meant to hurt you." "But you did," I said simply. "And the worst part is, you might be right about me being okay without your help. But that doesn't make what you did any less wrong." I stood up from the swing, the chains rattling behind me. "For as long as I can remember, you and Dad have enabled Tyler's failures while taking my successes for granted. You never pushed him to do better because you were too busy making excuses for him. And you never truly celebrated my achievements because they were expected." My mother's eyes glistened with tears in the moonlight. "That's not true, Emma. We've always been proud of you." "Pride isn't the same as support," I replied. "And right now, I need to find people who will give me both." I left her sitting on the swing, a small figure bathed in the silver glow of the moon, and returned to my room. As I packed the last of my belongings, I realized something important. My mother had inadvertently given me a gift with her explanation. She had confirmed what I'd always suspected, but never fully acknowledged, that my family saw me as resilient enough to overcome any obstacle, including their betrayal. And perhaps they were right. The morning of my departure arrived with a strange sense of calm. My belongings, those I was taking with me, were packed into 2 suitcases and a backpack. The rest would stay in my room, which my parents had promised not to touch in my absence. As I dragged my luggage downstairs, I found my family waiting in the living room. My father stood awkwardly by the fireplace, my mother perched on the edge of the sofa, and Tyler leaned against the wall, arms crossed defensively. "Your Uber will be here soon?" my father asked, his question more statement than inquiry. I nodded. "Aunt Diane is expecting me for dinner." My mother approached, wrapping me in a tight hug that I reluctantly returned. "Call us when you arrive," she whispered. "Please." "I will," I promised, though we both knew our communication would be minimal in the coming months. My father cleared his throat. "Emma, I know you feel this is something you need to do, but our door is always open if you change your mind. Berkeley will still be there next year, and perhaps by then we can reassess the financial situation." Translation: if Tyler's business failed again, and if I behaved as the dutiful daughter in the meantime, perhaps they might find a way to help me after all. The conditional nature of their support had never been clearer. "I'll keep that in mind," I replied non-committally. Tyler stepped forward, extending an envelope. "Here." I took it warily. "What's this?" $2,000, he admitted. "It's not much compared to what... Well, it's what I can spare from the business account right now. No strings attached." I stared at the envelope, emotions warring within me. Part of me wanted to throw it back in his face. His gesture amounted to less than 10% of what had been taken from me. But the practical side of me knew that starting over came with unexpected expenses, and pride wouldn't pay for emergencies. "Thank you," I said finally, tucking the envelope into my bag. "I hope your brewery succeeds, Tyler. I really do." He looked surprised at my sincerity, and for a brief moment, I glimpsed the brother I had once adored, the one who had taught me to ride a bike and defended me from playground bullies before he had grown into a man who would take my future without a second thought. My phone buzzed with a notification. "My ride is here," I announced, reaching for my suitcases. My father insisted on carrying them to the car, and we walked in silence down the front path. After loading my bags, he turned to me, his expression uncharacteristically vulnerable. "Emma, he began, then stopped, seeming to struggle with his words. "I want you to know that your mother and I love you very much. We may have made a terrible mistake, but it was never because we didn't believe in you." I looked at my childhood home, at my family standing in the doorway watching our exchange, and felt a strange mixture of sadness and liberation. "I know you love me, Dad," I said softly. "But love without respect isn't enough." With those words hanging between us, I climbed into the waiting car and directed the driver to Aunt Diane's address across town. As we pulled away, I didn't look back. The chapter of my life where I defined myself by my parents' expectations was over. What came next would be entirely of my own making. Aunt Diane's apartment was everything our family home was not: colorful, cluttered, and bursting with evidence of a life lived on her own terms. My mother's sister had always been the family rebel, choosing a career in photojournalism over marriage and settling down. Her walls were covered with photographs from her travels around the world, each telling a story of adventure and discovery. "Welcome to freedom, kiddo," she greeted me at the door, pulling me into a fierce hug that smelled of sandalwood and coffee. "Your new life awaits." Over the next 2 weeks, Aunt Diane became not just my temporary landlord, but my mentor in independence. She asked questions nobody in my family had bothered to ask, not about my grades or achievements, but about what made me come alive, what I feared, what I dreamed about when nobody was watching. Late one night, sitting on her balcony surrounded by potted plants and fairy lights, she posed the question that would change everything. "So, what's your real plan, Emma?" she asked, swirling red wine in her glass. "And don't tell me about this coding boot camp. That's just a vehicle. What's driving you?" I stared out at the city lights, considering her question. "I want to prove them wrong," I admitted. "I want to show my parents that taking away my college fund wasn't just unfair. It was the biggest mistake they could have made." Aunt Diane smiled knowingly. "Revenge is a powerful motivator, but it won't sustain you." "What else?" I thought deeper, past the hurt and anger that had propelled me this far. "I want to build something that's entirely mine. Something no one can take away from me. Skills, a career, a life that doesn't depend on anyone else's approval or support." She nodded, satisfaction in her eyes. "Now we're getting somewhere. Independence isn't just about paying your own bills, Emma. It's about owning your choices, the good ones and the bad ones. It's about creating a life so authentically yours that even when it gets hard, you never regret the path you chose." "Is that how you feel about your life?" I asked, curious about the aunt who had always been presented to me as a cautionary tale by my parents. The woman who never settled down, as if that were a failure rather than a choice. Aunt Diane laughed, her head tilting back. "God, yes. I've been broke, heartbroken, stranded in countries where I didn't speak the language. I've slept on floors and missed opportunities, but I've also stood on mountains at sunrise, documented revolutions, fallen in love in cities I couldn't pronounce. And not once have I wished for a safer, smaller life." Her words resonated somewhere deep inside me, touching a part of myself I hadn't fully acknowledged, the part that had always felt constrained by my parents' narrow definition of success. "What if I fail?" I whispered, voicing my deepest fear. "Oh, honey," Aunt Diane said, reaching over to squeeze my hand. "You will. Repeatedly and spectacularly. And then you'll get up and try something else. That's not failure. That's living." The warmth and wisdom in her voice wrapped around me like a blanket, and for the first time since discovering my parents' betrayal, I felt genuine excitement about the future. Not just determination to prove them wrong, but eagerness to discover who I might become without their expectations shaping my choices. When the time came to leave for Austin and the Digital Nomad Academy campus, Aunt Diane drove me to the airport. As we hugged goodbye at the departure terminal, she pressed something into my hand, a small worn leather notebook. "What's this?" I asked, flipping through the blank pages. "Your story," she replied. "The one you're about to write. Fill it with triumph and disaster, with moments that take your breath away. And when you've filled every page, send it to me. I want to know the woman you become." With tears in my eyes, I hugged her fiercely, grateful beyond words for her belief in me, a belief that asked for nothing in return. On the plane to Austin, I opened the notebook and wrote on the first page, "The day I started living for, myself." It wasn't dramatic or profound, but it was true. And truth, I was beginning to understand, was the foundation upon which I would build my new life. The Digital Nomad Academy campus turned out to be a converted warehouse in East Austin, its industrial exterior belying the state-of-the-art technology within. My cohort consisted of 48 other students from across the country, all of us bound by the common thread of seeking an unconventional path to success. Our accommodations were Spartan but functional, dormitory-style rooms with simple furnishings and shared common spaces. The message was clear. We weren't here for comfort. We were here to work, to learn, to transform. The intensity of the program became apparent on the very first day. Our lead instructor, Mia Rodriguez, aka former Silicon Valley developer who had left a prestigious position to start the academy, addressed us with unvarnished honesty. "Half of you won't make it through this program," she announced, her gaze sweeping across the room. "Not because you aren't smart enough, but because you aren't hungry enough. This isn't college where you can coast through with last-minute cramming and charm. This is boot camp. This is where you strip away everything you thought you knew and rebuild from the ground up. Her words should have been intimidating, but instead, I felt a thrill of anticipation. This was exactly what I needed. A place where my past didn't matter, where I would be judged solely on what I could create with my own mind and hands. The days quickly fell into a demanding rhythm. Mornings were dedicated to technical training, coding languages, development frameworks, algorithm challenges. Afternoons focused on digital marketing and content creation, SEO strategies, audience building, monetization models. Evenings were for project work, where we applied the day's learnings to real-world problems for actual clients who had partnered with the academy. The workload was crushing. Many nights I coded until my vision blurred, until the characters on my screen seemed to swim before my eyes. There were moments of frustration so intense I nearly put my fist through the wall. Moments of confusion that made me question my intelligence, my choices, my ability to succeed in this new world. But there were also moments of pure electric triumph, when a stubborn bug finally yielded to my persistence, when a client praised my solution, when I built something that hadn't existed until my fingers brought it to life. I made friends, real ones, the kind forged in the crucible of shared struggle. Nadia, a former accountant from Chicago who had quit her stable job after a health scare, made her realize life was too short for safety. Marcus, a high school dropout from rural Georgia with a natural talent for code that made even our instructors take notice. Dina, a single mother from Seattle who attended classes with her infant daughter sleeping in a carrier on her chest, determined to create a better future for them both. We formed study groups that turned into support systems, pushing each other through the difficult days, celebrating each small victory. For the first time in my life, I was surrounded by people who saw me clearly, not as the perfect student, not as the responsible daughter, not as Tyler's little sister, but simply as Emma with all my strengths and flaws unfiltered. Weeks turned into months, and slowly, I felt myself changing. It wasn't just the technical skills, though those were growing exponentially. It was something deeper, a fundamental shift in how I saw myself and my place in the world. I no longer measured my worth by external validation. Instead, I found satisfaction in the concrete evidence of my growing capabilities. Each completed project, each solved problem, each new skill mastered became a building block in the foundation of my new identity. One based not on comparison to others, but on my own evolution. I kept my promise to call my parents when I first arrived in Austin, but our conversations remained brief and superficial. They asked about the program, about my accommodations, about whether I was eating properly, the same questions they might ask a distant acquaintance. I provided polite, minimal answers, maintaining the boundary I had established. Tyler called once to tell me his brewery had secured its first distribution deal with a local restaurant chain. I congratulated him sincerely, genuinely hoping he would succeed, if only to prove that my sacrifice hadn't been completely in vain. But I felt no obligation to feign greater interest than I actually felt. Instead, I poured my energy into my work, into building relationships with my new peers, and into the side project that had begun to take shape in my mind, an idea born from a casual conversation in the academy's kitchen one night. "The problem with learning to code," Marcus had said, stirring instant ramen as he leaned against the counter, "is that all the resources assume you have some base knowledge already. There's nothing truly for beginners that doesn't talk down to them." Nadia had nodded emphatically. "Exactly. Everything's either too basic, like explaining what a computer is, or jumps straight into advanced concepts without the bridge in between. There should be a middle ground," I mused, the seed of an idea taking root. Something that assumes you're intelligent but completely new to coding. Something that builds on universal experiences to explain technical concepts. That night, I couldn't sleep, my mind racing with possibilities. By morning, I had outlined the concept for Code Translated, a web platform that would explain programming concepts through metaphors drawn from everyday life, targeted specifically at career changers and adult learners. When I shared the idea with our entrepreneurship instructor, Raj, he didn't immediately dismiss it as naive or oversimplistic, as I half expected. Instead, he asked thoughtful questions, challenged my assumptions, and finally nodded with approval. "You've identified a genuine gap in the market," he acknowledged. "The question is, are you prepared to fill it?" 4 months into the program, I launched the first iteration of Code Translated as my personal project. It was basic, just a handful of lessons and metaphor-based explanations. But my fellow students embraced it enthusiastically, offering feedback and suggestions for improvement. To my surprise, it wasn't just my cohort who found value in my approach. When Mia shared the link with other instructors and Academy alumni, the response was overwhelmingly positive. Former students began using it with friends who had expressed interest in coding but felt intimidated by traditional resources. A few even reported using my metaphors in their own workplaces to explain technical concepts to non-technical colleagues. As the months passed, Code Translated grew alongside my technical skills. What had begun as a side project became increasingly central to my vision for my future. I wasn't just learning to code to get a job. I was coding to build something meaningful, something that could help others transform their lives the way I was transforming mine. 7 months into the program, during a routine check-in with Mia, she asked the question that would crystallize everything. "What are you planning to do after graduation, Emma? You've had several inquiries from our corporate partners. Some very attractive job offers could be coming your way." I hesitated, then decided to be honest. "I'm considering continuing with Code Translated full-time. I know it's risky compared to taking a corporate position, but it's yours," Mia finished for me, understanding in her eyes. "You've built it from nothing and you want to see how far you can take it." "Is that crazy?" I asked. "Turning down a stable job with benefits to pursue a project that might fail?" Mia leaned back in her chair, studying me thoughtfully. "When I left my job at Google to start this academy, everyone thought I was insane. 6-figure salary, stock options, prestige, all abandoned for an unproven model that might collapse within a year." She gestured around us at the thriving campus. 3 years later, we've launched more careers than I can count." She leaned forward, her expression intense. "The difference between those who succeed and those who don't isn't talent or luck, Emma. It's conviction. Do you believe in Code Translated enough to bet on it? Do you believe in yourself enough?" As I walked back to my dorm room after our meeting, her question echoed in my mind. Did I believe in myself enough? 6 months ago, I might have hesitated, might have chosen the safer path out of ingrained habit. But the woman I was becoming, the woman who had risen from the ashes of betrayal and disappointment, she didn't need the validation of a corporate job title or the security of a regular paycheck to affirm her worth. That night, I made my decision. Code Translated wouldn't just be a side project, it would be my future. My vehicle for creating the life I wanted, on my own terms, without depending on anyone else's approval or support. As I updated my project plan, expanding the scope and vision far beyond what I had initially imagined, I felt a surge of gratitude for the twist of fate that had led me here. If my parents hadn't given my college fund to Tyler, I would be at Berkeley now, following the conventional path, perhaps never discovering this passion or this strength within myself. Their betrayal, intended or not, had forced me to find my own way, and the path I was forging was far more exciting, far more authentic than the one that had been planned for me. In that moment of clarity, I realized something profound. The greatest gift my parents had unknowingly given me wasn't the college fund they had saved and then reallocated. It was the opportunity to discover that I didn't need it, or them. to create a life of meaning and purpose. With renewed determination, I opened my laptop and began to code. The future I was building might not look like the one I had once envisioned, but increasingly it looked like one I would choose for myself, again and again, with no regrets. 9 months into the Digital Nomad Academy program, I stood at a crossroads that would determine the direction of my entire future. On one side lay the conventional path, a job offer from Vertex Solutions, a respected tech firm that had partnered with the academy. The position offered stability, a competitive salary, and the validation that came from being selected among hundreds of applicants. On the other side was Code Translated, my growing platform that had evolved from a simple side project into something with genuine potential. The decision weighed heavily on me as I sat in Austin's Zilker Park one Saturday afternoon, laptop open but untouched as I watched families and couples enjoying the spring sunshine. My phone buzzed with a text from my mother, another in the series of cautious check-ins that had become our primary form of communication. "Just wanted to see how you're doing. Dad and I were thinking of you. Tyler's Brewery opened its tasting room last weekend. Very proud of him. Hope your studies are going well." I set the phone down without responding, a familiar mix of emotions washing over me. The updates about Tyler's success had become a regular feature of my mother's messages, always coupled with the subtle implication that my choice remained inexplicable to them. They still viewed my time at the academy as a temporary detour, a rebellion to be waited out before I returned to the sensible path they had envisioned for me. What would they say if they knew I was considering turning down a prestigious job, offer to pursue my own venture? The thought of their disappointment and confusion should have troubled me, but instead, I felt a strange sense of liberation. Their opinion, once the driving force behind so many of my decisions, had become increasingly irrelevant to the woman I was becoming. "You look deep in thought." The voice pulled me from my reverie. Dina, my friend from the academy, stood before me, her 7-month-old daughter Maya strapped to her chest in a colorful carrier. "Mind if we join you?" she asked, gesturing to the empty space on the blanket beside me. "Please do," I replied, grateful for the distraction from my thoughts. Dina settled beside me, adjusting Maya, who gurgled happily in the sunshine. At 32, Dina was one of the oldest in our cohort, with a decade of experience in marketing before she'd decided to pivot to tech. Her decision had been complicated by an unexpected pregnancy and the subsequent departure of her partner, who'd made it clear he wasn't ready for fatherhood. Yet despite these challenges, or perhaps because of them, Dina approached her coursework with a fierce determination that I deeply admired. "Vertex or Code Translated?" she asked without preamble, knowing me well enough to read my preoccupation. I smiled ruefully. Am I that transparent? Only to those of us who've watched. "You pour your heart into that platform for the past 6 months," she replied, gently bouncing Maya. "So, what's holding you back?" I sighed, trying to articulate the tangle of thoughts in my head. The sensible choice is obviously Vertex. Steady income, benefits, mentorship from established professionals. Code Translated is a risk. It might never generate enough revenue to support me, much less grow into everything I envision. Dina studied me thoughtfully. "You know, when I found out I was pregnant, everyone told me to take the sensible path. Stay in my secure job, accept my ex's financial support but low involvement, keep my head down and focus on stability. Above all else." She gazed down at Maya, stroking the baby's cheek with gentle fingers. But something in me rebelled against that advice. I kept thinking, what am I teaching this little person if I choose security over passion? If I let fear make my decisions? If I settle for less than what I believe I'm capable of achieving? Her words resonated deeply, echoing my own internal struggle. "Did you ever regret it?" I asked. "Choosing the harder path?" Dina laughed, the sound bright in the warm air. Every single day during the first trimester when I was coding through morning sickness, every time Maya wakes me up 3 times a night before an important project deadline. Her expression softened. But regret isn't the same as wishing I'd chosen differently. The hard moments are just part of the journey, not evidence that I made the wrong choice. She shifted Maya to her other arm, her eyes meeting mine directly. The question isn't really vertex versus code translated, Emma. It's about who you want to be. Are you someone who takes the safer route because it's expected and comfortable? Or are you someone who believes enough in her own vision to bet on it, even when the outcome isn't guaranteed? Put that way, the answer seemed suddenly blindingly clear. My entire life before the Digital Nomad Academy had been shaped by others' expectations. My parents' vision of success, the conventional metrics of achievement, the well-worn path from good grades to prestigious college to respectable career. Code Translated represented something different, not just a business, but a declaration of independence, a statement that I would define success on my own terms. I think I've always known, I admitted. I just needed someone to frame the question properly. Dina smiled knowingly. Sometimes we ask for advice when what we really want is permission to do what we already know is right for us. The next morning, I declined Vertex's offer with genuine gratitude for the opportunity, and then scheduled a meeting with Raj, my entrepreneurship instructor, to discuss next steps for Code Translated. When I entered his office, he didn't seem surprised by my decision. "I've been expecting you," he said, gesturing for me to take a seat. "Mia mentioned you might be choosing the entrepreneurial path." "Am I making a huge mistake?" I asked, a final moment of doubt surfacing despite my conviction. Raj leaned back in his chair, considering. "Possibly. Entrepreneurship is inherently risky. Most startups fail within the first few years." His frankness was refreshing, even as it sent a flutter of anxiety through my stomach. "But here's what I know about you, Emma. You've identified a genuine market need. Your platform already has dedicated users without any formal marketing. And most importantly, you have the rare combination of technical skill and communication ability that this particular venture requires." He pulled out a folder and slid it across the desk to me. "Which is why I'd like to offer you a spot in our Launchpad incubator program after graduation." I stared at the folder, stunned. The Launchpad was the Academy's highly selective post-graduation program for the most promising entrepreneurial ventures. It provided continued mentorship, workspace, networking opportunities, and most critically, introductions to potential investors. "I didn't apply," I stammered, confused. Raj smiled. "No, but Mia and I nominated you. The committee reviewed Code Translated and unanimously approved your admission." He paused, his expression turning serious. "This isn't charity, Emma. We only select projects we genuinely believe have potential for success. The Academy takes a small equity stake in exchange for the resources we provide. We wouldn't do that if we didn't think your venture was viable." As the reality of the opportunity sank in, a surge of emotions washed over me. Gratitude, excitement, and a profound sense of validation that had nothing to do with grades or parental approval. This was recognition of something I had built entirely on my own, a creation that existed because I had the courage to pour myself into it despite uncertainty. "Thank you," I said finally, my voice thick with emotion. "I won't waste this opportunity." Raj nodded, his expression softening. "I know you won't. Now, you have 2 months until graduation and the start of Launchpad. Here's what I suggest you focus on in the meantime." The remaining weeks of the Academy program passed in a blur of activity. By day, I completed my regular coursework, ensuring I would graduate with all the technical certifications the program offered. By night, I worked on expanding Code Translated, implementing Raj's suggestions to prepare for the Launchpad program. My classmates rallied around me, offering their skills and support. Marcus helped refine the back-end architecture to make the platform more scalable. Nadia, with her accounting background, helped me develop financial projections and a business model. Even Dina, despite her packed schedule, contributed marketing strategies and user experience insights. Graduation day arrived with a sense of ceremony that surprised me. The Academy held a formal event in a downtown Austin venue, with representatives from tech companies and local media in attendance. As each of us walked across the stage to receive our certificates, Mia provided a brief description of our achievements and future plans. Emma Chen, she announced when my turn came, whose platform Code Translated is revolutionizing how non-technical adults learn coding concepts. Emma will be joining our Launchpad Incubator program to further develop her venture, which already counts over 2,000 active users. The applause that followed felt surreal. 2,000 users. The number had grown rapidly in the final weeks as word of mouth spread beyond the Academy community. Each user represented someone whose relationship with technology might be transformed by the approach I had developed. As I stepped off the stage, certificate in hand, I scanned the audience automatically, a lifetime habit of looking for my parents' approval, not entirely erased by 9 months of independence. Of course, they weren't there. I had invited them pro forma, but they had declined, citing work commitments. Tyler had sent a congratulatory text that morning, sincere but brief, our relationship still in the tentative reconstruction phase. Their absence stung less than I expected. In their place were connections that felt equally meaningful, Aunt Diane beaming proudly from the third row, having flown in for the occasion, my cohort mates who had become true friends, instructors who had pushed me to exceed my own expectations. The reception following the ceremony buzzed with excitement as graduates mingled with potential employers and industry contacts. I found myself surrounded by people interested in Code Translated, asking questions, offering suggestions, exchanging contact information. In the midst of one such conversation, Raj appeared at my elbow, accompanied by a sharp-eyed woman in a tailored suit. "Emma, I'd like you to meet Victoria Liang, founder of Ascend Ventures," he introduced us. "Victoria, this is Emma Chen, the creator of Code Translated." I recognized the name immediately. Ascend Ventures was a venture capital firm known for its investments in educational technology. Meeting Victoria now, months before I would be seeking formal investment, was an unexpected opportunity. "Raj speaks very highly of your platform," Victoria said, shaking my hand with a firm grip. "I'd love to hear more about your vision for Code Translated." What followed was an impromptu pitch session that I hadn't prepared for but found myself navigating with surprising confidence. Victoria asked pointed questions about my business model, growth strategy, and competitive landscape. Questions that, thanks to my preparation for Launchpad, I could answer substantively. "You've clearly thought this through," she said after 20 minutes of discussion. Most early-stage founders focus exclusively on their product without considering the business fundamentals. "I believe in the platform," I replied honestly, "but I know that passion alone won't make it sustainable. I want Code Translated to become a resource that helps thousands of people transform their careers, and that requires building a viable business, not just a good product." Victoria nodded approvingly. "Smart approach. Too many founders think business fundamentals somehow corrupt their vision." She handed me her card. "I'd like to keep tabs on your progress. When you're ready to seek seed funding, call me directly. No promises, but I'm intrigued by what you're building." As she moved on to speak with other graduates, I stared at the business card in my hand, hardly believing what had just occurred. A direct line to a respected venture capitalist, months before I had planned to begin approaching investors. Aunt Diane found me then, pulling me into a fierce hug. "Look at you," she said, holding me at arm's length. "Absolutely glowing. And was that Victoria Liang I saw you speaking with?" "You know her?" I asked, surprised. "I photographed her for a Women in Tech feature last year. She doesn't waste time on founders she doesn't believe in." Aunt Diane's eyes sparkled with pride. "My niece, the tech entrepreneur." Later that evening, as the celebration wound down, I checked my phone to find a voice message from my mother. With slight trepidation, I pressed play. "Emma, honey, congratulations on your graduation. Your father and I are very proud of you for completing the program." Her voice sounded tentative, unsure. "We received the materials you sent about your platform. It's impressive, though we don't entirely understand all the technical aspects. Tyler says it's actually pretty cool, which I gather is high praise coming from him." She paused, and I could hear the emotional struggle in her silence. "We'd like to hear more about your plans if you're willing to share them. Perhaps when you're next home. Anyway, congratulations again. We love you." I saved the message, complex emotions swirling through me. There was a note of genuine interest in my mother's voice that I hadn't heard before, not the usual polite inquiry about my studies, but actual curiosity about what I was building. It wasn't an apology for their past actions, nor an admission that they had underestimated me, but it was something. A small crack in the wall of misunderstanding between us. I decided to call them the next day, not to seek approval or forgiveness, but simply to share my reality with them as one adult to others. Whether they fully understood or validated my choices was no longer the point. I had proven to myself what mattered most, that I could fall and still rise, that I could lose support and still find my way, that I could build something meaningful without the safety net I had once thought essential. The Launchpad program began the following week, bringing with it a new rhythm to my days. I was assigned a dedicated mentor, Gabriel Torres, a successful entrepreneur who had founded and sold 2 educational technology companies. Under his guidance, Code Translated evolved rapidly from a project into a proper startup. "You've built something with genuine value," Gabriel told me during our first meeting as he explored the platform. "Now we need to refine the business model to ensure it's sustainable while remaining accessible to your target users." Together, we developed a tiered approach, a free basic version that would continue to serve as an entry point and grow our user base, a premium subscription with additional features and content, and an enterprise version for companies looking to reskill their non-technical employees. The next 3 months were the most intense of my life, eclipsing even the rigorous academy program. I worked 14-hour days, sleeping on the couch in the Launchpad workspace more often than in my own apartment. Every aspect of the business required attention, refining the product, building the team, developing marketing strategies, preparing investor materials, establishing legal and financial structures. I hired Marcus as my first employee, bringing his technical brilliance officially into the venture. Nadia joined part-time, managing our finances while also working at a local tech firm. Dina couldn't commit to full-time work with Maya to care for, but she took on contract projects, her insights into the needs of career changers proving invaluable to our content development. As promised, Raj facilitated introductions to potential investors, beginning with smaller angel investors who specialized in educational technology. The first few pitches were nerve-wracking disasters. I stumbled over key points, failed to address critical questions, and generally projected an aura of inexperience that did not inspire confidence. "You're thinking like a student, not a CEO," Gabriel told me bluntly after one particularly painful pitch session. "You're asking for permission when you should be demonstrating conviction. These investors aren't teachers grading your performance. They're potential partners evaluating whether to bet on your vision." His criticism stung, but I recognized the truth in it. I had spent so many years seeking approval from authority figures, parents, teachers, professors, that the habit had become ingrained. Even as I built something entirely my own, part of me still sought external validation rather than trusting my own judgment. That night, I called Aunt Diane, needing her particular brand of wisdom. "I keep blowing investor pitches," I admitted after explaining the situation. "Gabriel says I'm not projecting confidence." "Are you confident?" she asked simply. Not in your presentation skills, but in what you're building. Absolutely, I replied without hesitation. Code Translated works. Our user numbers prove it. Our retention rates are exceptional. The feedback is consistently positive. The business model is solid. Then stop asking for their money, Aunt Diane said, and start explaining why they'd be foolish not to invest. Her reframing shifted something fundamental in my approach. Before my next pitch, I sat alone in the preparation room, mentally reviewing not what I hoped to get from the investors, but what I was offering them. The opportunity to be part of something transformative, something with proven traction and enormous potential. The difference was immediate and dramatic. I entered the room not as a supplicant, but as a founder with a valuable opportunity to share. My presentation was clear, direct, and unapologetically confident. I knew the numbers cold, anticipated the challenging questions, and acknowledged the risks while emphasizing the unique strengths of our approach. By the end of the Launchpad program's first phase, Code Translated had secured $750,000 in seed funding from a combination of angel investors and a small venture fund, not including Victoria Liang's Ascend Ventures, which typically invested at later stages. The investment valued the company at $3 million pre-money, a figure that still felt surreal when I allowed myself to dwell on it. More important than the monetary validation was what the funding allowed us to do. Move into proper office space, hire 3 additional team members, accelerate our product development, and launch a strategic marketing campaign. Within 6 months of graduation, Code Translated had transformed from a student project into a legitimate startup with 10,000 users and growing revenue from premium subscriptions. The growth brought new challenges and pressures, of course. As CEO, I faced decisions daily that would impact not just my own future, but the livelihoods of my employees and the educational experiences of our users. There were nights I lay awake, second-guessing choices, worrying about runway and competition, and 1,000 other concerns that came with the territory. But beneath the anxiety of responsibility ran a current of deep satisfaction unlike anything I had experienced before. This venture, this team, this growing community of users, they existed because I had refused to accept the limitations placed upon me, because I had chosen to build rather than break when faced with betrayal, because I had recognized that my parents' inability to see my potential was their loss, not a true reflection of what I could achieve. I maintained minimal contact with my family during this period, our communication limited to occasional texts and brief calls on birthdays and holidays. They knew I was running my website, as they called it, but showed little interest in the details beyond polite inquiries. Tyler's Brewery was struggling with distribution challenges, I gathered from my mother's updates, but they remained optimistic about its prospects. Then came the email that would unexpectedly reconnect these separate worlds. The subject line read simply, "Request for partnership discussion," and it was from the Career Services Director at Berkeley's School of Journalism, my once dream school. "Dear Ms. Chen," it began, "several of our faculty members have been following the development of Code Translated with great interest, particularly as we expand our curriculum to include more digital media components. We believe there may be potential for collaboration between Berkeley's journalism program and your platform, specifically in developing modules that help journalism students understand the technical aspects of digital publishing and data visualization." The irony was exquisite. The institution that had accepted me, that I had worked so hard to attend before my parents redirected my college fund, was now approaching me as a potential business partner. Not as a student seeking admission, but as a founder with something valuable to offer them. I scheduled the call they requested, curious but cautious. The conversation with Professor Janet Walsh, Berkeley's digital journalism chair, was enlightening. They weren't just interested in licensing our content. They wanted to develop a custom curriculum in partnership with Code Translated, potentially expanding to other departments if the journalism pilot proved successful. Your approach to explaining technical concepts is precisely what our students need, Professor Walsh explained. We've tried various coding boot camps and technical trainings, but they don't address the specific context of journalism. Your platform's focus on real-world applications and metaphor-based learning seems ideally suited to our needs. By the end of the call, we had outlined a potential six-figure contract that would give Berkeley custom modules while providing code, translated with an important institutional client and valuable academic credibility. Professor Walsh promised to send a formal proposal within the week for my team to review. As I hung up, a complex emotion washed over me. Not quite vindication, but something adjacent to it. A year and a half ago, I had been devastated by the loss of my Berkeley opportunity. Now I was entering into a relationship with them as an equal, offering value they couldn't find elsewhere. I picked up my phone and, after a moment's hesitation, called my parents' home number. My father answered, his voice registering surprise at seeing my name on the caller ID. "Emma, is everything all right?" "Everything's fine, Dad," I assured him. "Actually, everything's really good. I have some news I wanted to share with you and—" "Mom, is she there?" There was a pause, then sounds of movement as he presumably went to find my mother. Once they were both on the line, I took a deep breath and began to tell them about the Berkeley partnership, explaining the significance of the institution in my field and the validation this opportunity represented. As I spoke, I was conscious of not framing the news as a triumph over their low expectations. This call wasn't about proving them wrong. It was about sharing a significant milestone with people who, despite our complicated history, were still connected to my life. "That's remarkable, Emma," my father said when I had finished, genuine amazement in his voice. "A partnership with Berkeley? After just a year in business?" "We're still finalizing the details," I clarified. "But yes, it's a major opportunity for Code Translated." "I don't think we realized," my mother began, then paused, seemingly struggling with her words. "The materials you sent made it seem interesting, but we didn't understand the scale of what you were building." There was an uncomfortable silence, heavy with unspoken acknowledgments. Then my father cleared his throat. "Your mother and I have been discussing this, and, well, with Tyler's brewery facing some challenges, he's decided to sell his stake to his partners. Once that transaction is complete, we'd like to... That is, we want to make things right, Emma. We want to repay what should have been your college fund." The offer caught me completely off guard. After all this time, after everything that had happened, they wanted to restore what had been taken from me. A year ago, this would have felt like vindication, like the apology I had been waiting for. Now it felt unnecessary. "That's a generous offer, Dad," I said carefully, "but I don't need the money. Code Translated is profitable, and we've secured investment that gives us runway for continued growth." "But it's yours," my mother insisted. "It was always meant for your education, your future." I smiled to myself, hearing the echo of their old priorities. Conventional education as the only path to success. I appreciate that, but I've built my future now, on my terms. If you really want to make things right, there are better ways than writing a check. "What do you mean?" my father asked cautiously. "Come visit," I suggested. "See what I've built, meet my team, understand what I actually do instead of just calling it my website or computer thing. That would mean more to me than any amount of money." There was another pause, and I could almost see them exchanging glances in our kitchen, adjusting to this unexpected response. "We'd like that," my mother said finally, a new warmth in her voice. "We'd like that very much." As we discussed details for their visit, I felt a shifting in our relationship, not a complete healing of old wounds, but a step towards something new. They were seeing me, perhaps for the first time, not as their daughter who needed direction and support, but as a woman who had created something meaningful through her own vision and effort. The money that had been meant to buy me a conventional future had instead, through its very absence, forced me to create something far more valuable: the knowledge that I could rely on myself, that I could transform setbacks into opportunities, that I could build a life not defined by others' expectations. My parents had given my college fund to my brother, never expecting what I would achieve without their help. But in that unexpected void, I had found something that no amount of money could buy: the power to define success on my own terms and the confidence to pursue it relentlessly, come what may. 3 years had passed since I stood in my childhood home and learned that my college fund had been given to my brother. 3 years since I had walked away from the carefully plotted course of my life and ventured into the unknown. Now, as I stood in the gleaming lobby of the Westfield Conference Center in San Francisco, surrounded by the buzz of the annual EdTech Summit, I could hardly believe the path my life had taken. "Ms. Chen, they're ready for your keynote setup." A young event coordinator approached, tablet in hand. "The tech team needs you for a final sound check before the doors open." I nodded, straightening the blazer I'd chosen carefully for the occasion. Professional but not stuffy, confident without being flashy. My outfit reflected the brand I'd built with code-translated, accessible expertise. The main auditorium was massive, seating nearly 1,000 attendees. As I walked onto the stage, I couldn't help remembering my first investor pitch, how my voice had trembled, how I doubted my right to be in the room. Now, as the technician clipped the microphone to my collar and ran through the presentation slides, I felt a calm certainty. I belonged here. "Testing, 1, 2. I spoke into the microphone, watching the audio levels rise and fall on the monitor. Code Translated transforms technical education by meeting learners where they are. The technician gave me a thumbs up. "Perfect levels, Ms. Chen. You're all set. Doors open in 30 minutes and you're on in an hour." Back in the green room, I checked my phone to find texts from my team, scattered around the conference on various missions. Marcus had secured a meeting with a potential international distribution partner. Nadia had just finished a successful panel discussion on alternative revenue models for educational platforms. Dina, now our chief marketing officer, was coordinating press interviews for later in the day. Among the professional updates was a message from my mother. "Good luck with your speech today, Emma. Dad and I will be watching the live stream. So proud of you." The message brought a small smile to my face. My relationship with my parents had evolved into something I hadn't expected, not the unconditional closeness some families enjoyed, but a measured respect that acknowledged our past while allowing for a different future. Their visit to Austin 2 years ago had been a turning point, the first time they had seen Code Translated as more than their daughter's computer project. I remembered my father's expression as he'd toured our offices, watched demonstrations of the platform, and met the team that had grown to 15 employees by then. There had been confusion at first, then growing comprehension, and finally, most surprisingly, genuine respect. "This is remarkable, Emma," he had said over dinner that evening. "I had no idea. The scope of what you've built, the impact you're having." My mother had reached across the table to squeeze my hand. "When you turned down the money we offered to repay, I didn't understand. Now I do. This isn't about the college fund anymore, is it?" "It never really was," I had admitted. "Not after the first few months. This became about proving something to myself, not to you." That conversation hadn't magically healed all the wounds between us. There were still moments of tension, still occasions when their instinct to advise clashed with my hard-won independence, but there was also a new foundation of mutual respect that made continued relationship possible. In a strange way, I had Tyler to thank for part of this transformation. After his brewery failed, the partners buying him out for pennies on the dollar, he had gone through a period of deep reflection. Unlike his previous failures, which he had brushed off with easy charm and quick excuses, this one had forced him to confront some uncomfortable truths about himself and his patterns. To everyone's surprise, including mine. He had enrolled in community college, focusing on business administration with a seriousness none of us had seen from him before. When he'd called me to share this decision, I had been wary, expecting another request for support or validation. Instead, he had simply said, "I'm trying to learn from you, Em, not just about business, but about follow-through." The compliment had caught me off guard, coming from the brother who had always been the family's golden child. Our relationship remained complicated, but that moment of genuine acknowledgement had opened a door to something better than the resentment I had carried for so long. A knock at the green room door pulled me from these reflections. 10 minutes, Ms. Chen. The event coordinator smiled. "We've got a full house out there." I took a deep breath, centering myself for the presentation ahead. The title slide of my keynote was already displayed on my laptop. Breaking Barriers: How Metaphor-Based Learning is Democratizing Technical Education. 3 years ago, I couldn't have imagined standing on this stage as a thought leader in educational technology. 3 years ago, I had been a devastated teenager watching my carefully constructed future crumble because my parents had chosen my brother's needs over mine. Yet here I was, preparing to address 1,000 industry professionals, not as someone seeking validation, but as someone whose insights they valued, someone who had built something meaningful from the ashes of disappointment. As I walked onto the stage to enthusiastic applause, the lights momentarily blinding me to the audience, I felt a surge of gratitude for the betrayal that had set me on this path. Without that painful moment in my parents' kitchen, I might never have discovered my capacity for transformation, for building something that was truly mine. "Thank you for that warm welcome," I began, my voice steady and confident. 3 years ago, I was supposed to be a student at Berkeley, following a traditional path to a traditional career. Instead, life had other plans for me. Painful plans that felt like failure at the time, but ultimately revealed possibilities I couldn't have imagined. For the next 45 minutes, I shared the story of Code Translated, not my personal journey, but the evolution of the platform from a simple idea into an educational system that had helped over 300,000 people transition into technical careers. I explained our research into metaphor-based learning, our data on retention and application rates, and our vision for the future of accessible technical education. The audience response was everything I could have hoped for: engaged questions, thoughtful discussions, and a standing ovation that left me momentarily speechless with gratitude. As I stepped off the stage, I was immediately surrounded by attendees eager to continue the conversation, to explore partnerships, to share their own experiences with our platform. Among the crowd, I spotted a familiar face, Victoria Liang, from Ascend Ventures, who had become one of our lead investors in our Series A, round a year after the Digital Nomad Academy graduation. She made her way through the throng, elegant as ever in a tailored suit, and gave me a warm embrace. "Magnificent presentation, Emma," she said. "You've come a long way from that nervous young founder I met at your graduation." I laughed, remembering our first formal pitch meeting a year after that initial introduction. "I still can't believe you invested after I spilled coffee all over my financial projections." Victoria smiled. "I didn't invest in your ability to hold a coffee cup. I invested in your vision and your determination. Both have proven even stronger than I anticipated." She glanced at her watch. "I have a panel in 10 minutes, but I wanted to let you know that the team at Horizon Academy reached out to me this morning." My pulse quickened. Horizon Academy was one of the largest online education providers in the country, with millions of students globally. We had been in preliminary discussions about a potential acquisition for months, but the conversations had been proceeding slowly. "They were impressed by the user engagement metrics we shared last week," Victoria continued. "They're ready to move forward with a formal offer. The term sheet should be in your inbox by end of day." I blinked, trying to process the magnitude of this development. An acquisition by Horizon wouldn't just validate everything we had built, it would exponentially expand our reach, bringing our approach to technical education to learners worldwide. The financial implications were equally staggering. The numbers being discussed would make everyone on the team financially secure, with the early employees becoming genuinely wealthy. That's incredible news, I managed, my mind already racing through the implications. Victoria squeezed my arm. Think about what you want, Emma. An acquisition offers certain advantages, but remaining independent has others. This is your vision. Make sure any deal honors that. With those words and a quick kiss on my cheek, she disappeared into the crowd toward her panel. The rest of the conference passed in a blur of meetings, networking conversations, and media interviews. By the time I returned to my hotel room that evening, I was physically exhausted, but mentally exhilarated. The Horizon Academy term sheet had indeed arrived, and the offer was even more generous than our discussions had suggested: $45 million, with provisions for the team to continue operating with significant autonomy and expanded resources. I sat on the edge of the hotel bed, staring at the figures on my laptop screen. Just 3 years ago, I had stood in my childhood bedroom, devastated by the loss of my college fund, approximately $80,000 that had represented my future. Now, I was looking at an offer that valued the company I had built at nearly 600 times that amount. The irony wasn't lost on me. My parents' decision to give my college fund to Tyler had been devastating at the time, but it had set in motion a chain of events that led to something far more valuable than the conventional path I had planned to follow. Without that betrayal, I might never have discovered my capacity for entrepreneurship, never have built Code Translated, never have found this particular version of success. Almost without thinking, I reached for my phone and dialed my parents' number. It was late in the evening, but I knew they would still be up, probably watching one of the crime dramas they enjoyed together. My father answered on the third ring. "Emma, is everything all right?" "Everything's fine, Dad," I assured him, realizing that unexpected calls from me still triggered parental concern. "Actually, everything's amazing. Is Mom there too? I'd like to share some news with both of you." I heard shuffling as he put the phone on speaker, and then my mother's voice joined the conversation. "We watched your keynote online, honey. You were wonderful. So poised, so knowledgeable." "Thank you," I said, genuinely touched by their support, something that still felt somewhat new and precious. "I actually have some big news. We've received an acquisition offer from Horizon Academy. It's substantial." "Acquisition?" my father repeated. "You mean they want to buy Code Translated?" "Yes," I confirmed. "The offer is $45 million, with provisions for our team to continue leading the platform's development within their larger organization." There was a stunned silence on the other end of the line. Then my mother's voice, thick with emotion. "Oh, Emma, I don't even know what to say." "That's extraordinary," my father added, audible shock in his voice. "I knew your company was doing well, but this is beyond anything we imagined." There was another pause, heavy with unspoken thoughts. Then my father cleared his throat. "Emma, I need to say something. Your mother and we made a terrible mistake when we took your college fund for Tyler's business. We thought we were making the right choice at the time, helping the child who seemed to need it more, but we were wrong. So wrong." "Dad," I began, not wanting to revisit old wounds on this triumphant day. "Please, let me finish," he interrupted gently. "We underestimated you. We saw you as our responsible, capable daughter who would be fine no matter what. We took your resilience for granted. And in doing so, we failed to recognize your potential, your vision, your determination. I am so deeply sorry for that failure." Tears welled in my eyes, unexpected and unwelcome. I had told myself I was past, needing their approval or apology, that I had moved beyond the hurt of that betrayal. Yet hearing my father acknowledge not just the action but the pattern of thought behind it touched something deep within me. "Thank you for saying that," I managed, my voice steadier than I felt. "It means a lot to hear." "We are so proud of you, Emma," my mother added, audibly crying now. "Not because of the money, though of course that's incredible. We're proud of the person you've become, someone who creates opportunities not just for herself but for others, someone who turns setbacks into stepping stones, someone who refuses to be defined by other people's limitations." I wiped at my tears, grateful they couldn't see me. "I couldn't have done it without you," I said, surprising myself with the realization that this was true, though not in the way parents typically help their children succeed. "What do you mean?" my father asked, confusion evident in his voice. I took a deep breath, organizing my thoughts. "If you hadn't taken my college fund, I would be graduating from Berkeley right now, probably with student loan debt, looking for an entry-level position in journalism. I would never have discovered my passion for making technical concepts accessible. I would never have built Code Translated. I would never have learned what I'm truly capable of." There was a weighted silence as they absorbed this perspective. "So, in a strange way," I continued, "the worst thing you ever did for me ultimately led to the best thing that's ever happened to me. Not because taking my college fund was the right decision, it wasn't, but because it forced me to find strength and capabilities within myself that I might never have discovered otherwise." My mother's voice came softly through the phone. "I wish we could have supported your journey without hurting you first." "Me too," I admitted. "But we can't change the past. We can only learn from it. And I've learned that sometimes the greatest opportunities come disguised as painful setbacks." "Have you decided whether to accept the offer?" my father asked, practical as always. "Not yet," I replied. "My team and I will be discussing it over the next few days. It's a big decision, not just for me, but for everyone who's helped build Code Translated." We talked for a while longer, sharing details of the conference and catching up on family. News. Tyler had completed his associate's degree and was working at a marketing firm, applying himself with an uncharacteristic dedication that suggested he too had learned valuable lessons from his failures. My parents were considering downsizing, their large family home feeling emptier now that both their children had established lives elsewhere. As we prepared to end the call, my father said something that lodged deep in my heart. "You know, Emma, there's a saying, success is the best revenge. But what you've done is better than revenge. You've created something meaningful, something that helps people transform their lives. That's not just success, that's significance." After the call ended, I stood by the hotel window, looking out at the San Francisco skyline glittering against the night sky. My father's words resonated with a truth I had been discovering gradually over the past 3 years. What had begun as a determination to prove my parents wrong, to show them the magnitude of their mistake in underestimating me, had evolved into something far more meaningful. Code Translated wasn't about proving anything to anyone anymore. It was about creating pathways for people who, like me, had faced obstacles to traditional educational opportunities. It was about transforming technical education from an exclusive domain into an accessible universe of possibility. The true validation wasn't in the acquisition offer, impressive as it was, but in the hundreds of thousands of lives changed through access to skills and knowledge previously beyond their reach. The next morning, I met with my leadership team. In a conference room we had booked at the hotel. Marcus, Nadia, Dina, and the 4 other executives who had joined us over the past 2 years sat around the table, copies of the Horizon Academy term sheet before them. We had all reviewed it individually. Now we needed to discuss it as a team. "Before we dive into the specifics," I began, "I want to hear everyone's initial thoughts. This isn't just my decision. It affects all of us and the direction of everything we've built together." I nodded to Marcus, my first employee and now our chief technology officer. Why don't you start? Marcus leaned forward, his expression thoughtful. Technically, it's a solid offer. The integration plan they've outlined respects our architecture and development approach. They're not looking to dismantle what we've built, but to scale it using their resources. Nadia, our CFO, nodded in agreement. Financially, it's more than fair. The valuation is at the high end of what we could expect, and the earnout provisions are reasonable. From a purely financial perspective, it's a strong offer. But this isn't just about financials, Dina pointed out, bouncing her now 3-year-old daughter Maya on her knee. We had become the rare startup that accommodated parents bringing children to work when necessary, part of our commitment to creating an inclusive workplace. It's about our mission, our community, and our independence. One by one, each team member shared their perspective, the opportunities the acquisition would provide, the concerns about maintaining our culture and values within a larger organization, the excitement about expanding our reach, the anxiety about losing control of our direction. As I listened, I was struck by how far we had all come. 3 years ago, I had been a teenager whose future had been derailed by her parents' decision. Marcus had been a high school dropout with exceptional coding skills but no formal credentials. Nadia had been an accountant trapped in a career that stifled her creativity. Dina had been a single mother struggling to balance parenthood with professional ambition. Now we sat around this table as executives of a company valued at $45 million, making decisions that would affect educational opportunities for learners worldwide. We had transformed not just our own lives, but the lives of countless others through the platform we had built together. I think we need to consider a third option, I said finally, after everyone had spoken. The term sheet presents it as a binary choice, sell or don't sell. But what if there's another path? What if we use this offer as leverage to secure the investment we need for international expansion without giving up control? The team looked at me with interest as I outlined my thinking. Horizon wants us because of what we've built and how we've built it. Our approach to education, our culture, our independence. These are assets, not liabilities. What if we counter with a strategic investment proposal? They provide capital and distribution channels. We maintain our autonomy and leadership. The room buzzed with renewed energy as we explored this possibility. By lunchtime, we had drafted a counter-proposal that would preserve what mattered most to us while securing the resources we needed to expand our impact globally. 2 days later, I sat across from Horizon Academy's CEO and their acquisition team, our counter-proposal between us. The negotiation was intense but respectful, both sides recognizing the value the other brought to the table. By the end of the meeting, we had the framework of an agreement. Horizon would make a strategic investment of $30 million for a 40% stake in Code Translated, with distribution agreements that would bring our platform to their global audience while allowing us to maintain control over our operations and future direction. As we shook hands on the preliminary agreement, Horizon's CEO smiled at me. You know, when we first approached you about an acquisition, I thought you'd jump at the offer. Most founders at your stage would. I returned his smile. I'm not most founders. And this isn't just a company to me. It's a mission. Some things are worth more than money. That's precisely why we want to partner with you, he replied. Your conviction and vision are rare. We look forward to supporting your journey while learning from your approach. As I left the meeting, I felt a profound sense of peace. The decision we had reached honored everything Code Translated had become, and everything it could still be. We had secured the resources to expand our impact without sacrificing the independence that made our approach unique. Walking through San Francisco's busy streets back to my hotel, I called Aunt Diane to share the news. She had been my steadfast supporter from the beginning, the first person to see my potential when my own parents had missed it. You brilliant, stubborn, magnificent woman, she exclaimed when I told her about the strategic investment agreement. "I knew you wouldn't simply sell. You've never taken the easy path. Not since that day you showed up on my doorstep with your suitcases and that fire in your eyes." I laughed, remembering how terrified I had actually been beneath the brave front I had presented. I was making it up as I went along back then. I had no idea where that path would lead. "But you had the courage to take the first step," Aunt Diane said, her voice warm with pride. "And look where it's brought you." That evening, after packing for my early morning flight back to Austin, I found myself drawn to the small balcony of my hotel room. The sun was setting over the city, painting the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks. I thought about the journey that had brought me here, from the devastated teenager whose college fund had been given to her brother, to the founder who had just negotiated a multi-million-dollar investment on her own terms. The path hadn't been easy. There had been moments of doubt, of fear, of exhaustion so profound I questioned whether I could continue. But through it all, there had been a driving force, not just the desire to prove my parents wrong, but the deepening conviction that I was building something that mattered, something that could transform lives the way my own had been transformed. My phone buzzed with a text from Tyler. "Mom told me about the Horizon deal. That's incredible, Em. Seriously proud of you. Would love to hear more about it next time you're home." I smiled at the message, at the genuine warmth behind it. Our relationship had evolved in ways I couldn't have imagined 3 years ago. The rivalry and resentment had faded, replaced by a cautious but growing mutual respect. We would never be the inseparable siblings of childhood stories, but we had found a way to appreciate each other's journeys, flaws and all. As the last light of day faded from the sky, I thought about the words I had shared with the audience during my keynote. Sometimes the greatest opportunities come disguised as painful setbacks. When my parents had given my college fund to my brother, it had felt like the end of my future. Instead, it had been the beginning of a journey I could never have imagined. A journey that had led me not just to success, but to significance. They had never expected what I would achieve without their help. In truth, neither had I. And perhaps that was the most valuable lesson of all, that our greatest limitations are often the ones we place on ourselves, and our greatest potential emerges when circumstances force us to look beyond the paths others have chosen for us, to forge new trails guided by our own vision and determination. As I turned to go back inside, I made a silent promise to myself to remember this lesson in every challenge that lay ahead, to approach each obstacle, not as a barrier, but as an invitation to discover new strengths, new possibilities, new aspects of myself yet to be revealed. My parents' decision to give my college fund to my brother had been the catalyst for this journey of discovery. For that unexpected gift, I was, at last, genuinely grateful. 5 years to the day after my parents had given my college fund to Tyler, I found myself back in my childhood home. The house looked smaller somehow, the familiar rooms holding echoes of memories that felt both recent and distant. My mother had redecorated the living room with new curtains and throw pillows, but the family photos still lined the mantelpiece, a visual timeline of our lives together. I paused at a new edition, a framed magazine cover featuring me under the headline 30 Under 30, The Entrepreneur's Reshaping Education. Next to it sat a feature article about Code Translated and the impact we were making in technical education accessibility. The sight of these prominently displayed articles warmed something inside me that I hadn't realized was still cold. "We're so proud of you," my mother said, coming up beside me. "Everyone who visits asks about you." I smiled, grateful for this simple acknowledgement. "Thanks, Mom." The kitchen smelled of cinnamon and apples, my favorite dessert from childhood that my mother still made whenever I visited. These visits had become more frequent over the past year, as the initial awkwardness and lingering hurt gradually gave way to a new, more honest relationship. My father entered from the back patio, where he'd been grilling. "Steaks are almost ready," he announced, giving my shoulder a gentle squeeze as he passed. This casual physical affection was new, part of his effort to bridge the emotional gap that had formed between us. Tyler arrived last, a bottle of wine in hand, not from his failed brewery venture, but a respected local vineyard. At 28, he carried himself differently than the carefree, entitled young man who had taken my college fund without a second thought. Business school had humbled him, as had the series of entry-level positions he'd worked through to earn. His current role is marketing manager at a sustainable energy company. "Sorry I'm late," he said, handing the wine to our mother. "Traffic was brutal." He turned to me with a genuine smile. "Congrats on the Horizon Education Partnership expansion, Em." The announcement made quite a splash. The expansion he referred to was our latest milestone. Code Translated's learning modules would now be included in the curriculum of over 500 community colleges nationwide, bringing accessible technical education to students who might otherwise be priced out of traditional computer science programs. "Thanks," I replied, accepting the compliment without deflection. Another small victory in my ongoing effort to own my success without diminishing it. As we settled around the dining table that had witnessed so many family dynamics over the years, I couldn't help reflecting on the journey that had brought us to this point. The painful betrayal that had set everything in motion felt simultaneously like yesterday and a lifetime ago. "Before we eat," my father said, uncharacteristically hesitant, "there's something your mother and I would like to discuss with both of you." I tensed slightly, old reflexes dying hard. Family announcements at the dinner table had rarely brought good news in my experience. My father cleared his throat. "As you know, we've been considering downsizing for a while now. The house is too big for just the two of us, and we found a condo in that new development by the lake. It's lovely," my mother added. "Single level, beautiful views, and a community of active adults our age." "That sounds perfect for you," I said, genuinely pleased by their excitement. "When would you move?" "We close next month," my father replied. "But that's not the main thing we wanted to discuss." He exchanged a glance with my mother, who nodded encouragingly. "We've decided what to do with the proceeds from selling this house." He reached for a folder that had been sitting on the sideboard and placed it on the table between Tyler and me. "We want to establish a foundation, the Chen Family Educational Trust. Its purpose will be to provide scholarships for students pursuing non-traditional educational paths, coding boot camps, trade schools, entrepreneurial programs, and other alternatives to traditional college." I stared at him, momentarily speechless. This was so far from anything I might have expected. "The idea came from watching your journey, Emma," my mother explained, her eyes bright with emotion. "You showed us that there are many paths to success, not just the conventional route we had always valued. We want to help other young people who might benefit from different educational opportunities." My father nodded. "We've set up the initial funding from our retirement savings, but the house proceeds will form the main endowment. We'd like both of you to serve as board members, helping to shape the criteria and select recipients." Tyler looked as surprised as I felt. "I think it's an amazing idea," he said after a moment, "especially given our family history with educational funding." He shot me an apologetic glance. The irony wasn't lost on any of us. 5 years ago, my parents had redirected my college fund to Tyler's business venture, inadvertently setting me on a path that had led to greater success than a traditional education might have. Now, they were creating a foundation specifically to support students choosing unconventional educational paths. "We know it doesn't erase the past," my father said quietly, addressing the elephant in the room. "But we hope it might transform our family's story into something that helps others." I reached for the folder, opening it to review the draft mission statement they had prepared. The language was thoughtful and inclusive, emphasizing innovation, accessibility, and diverse definitions of success. It was clear they had put considerable thought into this, perhaps working through some of their own evolving beliefs about education and opportunity. "I'd be honored to be involved," I said finally, emotion catching in my throat. "This is incredibly meaningful." My mother reached across the table to squeeze my hand. "We've learned so much from you, Emma, more than you know." As dinner progressed, we discussed practical aspects of the foundation, how applications would be reviewed, what types of programs would qualify, how we might measure impact. The conversation flowed with an ease that would have seemed impossible in the aftermath of that painful revelation 5 years ago. Later that evening, after Tyler had left and our parents had retired to their room, I found myself drawn to the backyard. The old swing set had finally been dismantled, replaced by a small meditation garden my mother had created during the pandemic. I sat on the stone bench, looking up at the same stars that had witnessed so many moments of my life in this place. The sound of the sliding door opening broke the silence. My father stepped out, wrapped in the cardigan he'd taken to wearing in the evenings as Michigan summers grew cooler with climate change. "Mind some company?" he asked. I patted the space beside me. "Not at all." He lowered himself onto the bench with a slight groan, a reminder that he was aging, something I often forgot in my busy life. For a few minutes, we sat in comfortable silence, listening to the chorus of evening insects. "I've been wanting to tell you something," he said finally. "Something I should have said years ago." I turned to look at him, his face half illuminated by the soft landscape lighting. "You were right that day, when you said we favored Tyler." His voice was steady but heavy with acknowledgement. "It wasn't intentional, but that doesn't make it any less real or harmful." The admission, so straightforward and without qualifiers, took me by surprise. "Dad, please let me finish," he said gently. "Your mother and I have had a lot of time to reflect, especially watching the different paths you and Tyler have taken. We made mistakes in how we parented both of you, expecting too little of him, taking too much for granted with you." He looked up at the stars. "When we gave your college fund to Tyler, we truly believed we were doing what was best for the family as a whole. We saw him struggling, saw you succeeding, and made a terrible calculation based on who we thought needed help more." "I know," I said softly. "I've come to understand that, even if I'll never fully agree with the decision. The thing is," he continued, "we weren't just wrong about the money. We were wrong about both of you in more fundamental ways." He turned to face me directly. "We underestimated your resilience, yes, but we also underestimated your vision, your capacity to forge your own path. And we overestimated Tyler's need for rescue, which only enabled his pattern of dependence." The insight surprised me. Not the recognition itself, but hearing it articulated so clearly by my father, who had once been so certain of his parental judgment. "The foundation," he added, "is partly our way of acknowledging that our understanding of education, success, and potential was too narrow. You broke that mold, Emma, and in doing so, you opened our eyes to possibilities we had never considered, not just for you, but for many young people who might thrive on less conventional paths." Tears pricked at my eyes, unexpected and unwelcome. I had told myself I no longer needed their understanding or approval, that I had moved beyond the hurt of that betrayal. Yet hearing my father's acknowledgement, not just of the action, but of the mindset behind it, touched something deep within me that apparently still needed healing. "Thank you for saying that," I managed, my voice steadier than I felt. He nodded, reaching over to cover my hand with his own weathered one. "I'm not saying this to be forgiven, Emma. Some parental mistakes leave marks that never fully fade, and that's a burden I have to carry. I'm saying it because it's true, and because you deserve to hear it." We sat together a while longer, the weight of unspoken history between us somehow lighter for having been acknowledged. When we eventually returned inside, something had shifted. Not dramatically, but perceptibly, in our relationship. The next morning, as I prepared to leave for the airport and my flight back to Austin, my mother handed me a small package wrapped in simple brown paper. "What's this?" I asked, turning it over in my hands. "Open it when you're ready," she said cryptically. "It's something I should have given you a long time ago." Curiosity piqued, I tucked it into my carry-on. It wasn't until I was at 30,000 feet, somewhere between Michigan and Texas, that I carefully unwrapped the package. Inside was a journal bound in soft leather, the pages yellowed with age. Opening the cover, I recognized my mother's handwriting immediately. Emma's. Future Fund. Plans and Dreams. With growing wonder, I turned the pages. The journal contained detailed notes about the college fund my parents had established for me. Regular entries spanning from my birth to my high school graduation, documenting every deposit, investment decision, and milestone. But more than the financial records, the journal held my mother's hopes and reflections. Emma won the district science fair today. Dr. Myers suggested we look into summer programs at the university, adding an extra $500 to the fund this month to ensure those opportunities will be available to her. 16 today. Emma mentioned journalism as a possible career path, looking into college programs with strong reputations in that field. Increased monthly contribution to account for rising tuition costs. Senior year beginning. Emma has her heart set on Berkeley. The fund is healthy but may not cover everything, especially if she pursues graduate studies. Discussing options with Richard for additional support if needed. The final entry was dated just 2 days before I discovered they had given the fund to Tyler. My mother's handwriting showed signs of distress, the pen pressing harder into the paper. Made the hardest decision today. Tyler needs capital for his business. It's his last chance to establish himself before having to move back home. After much discussion, we've decided to use Emma's college fund. She has her scholarship and can take loans for the remainder. She's always been our resilient one, our capable one. She'll understand this is what the family needs right now. We'll find a way to make it up to her later. Reading those words, the rationalization, the assumption of my understanding, the casual confidence that I would adapt to their decision, I felt a complex surge of emotions. There was the old hurt, of course, but also a strange compassion for my parents caught in their misguided calculation, and gratitude for my mother's courage in sharing this vulnerable record with me now. The final page contained a note, written in fresh ink, clearly added recently. Emma, I kept this journal to give to you when you graduated college, a record of the love and planning that went into preparing for your future. When we diverted those funds, I couldn't bear to look at it, much less share it with you. It stood as evidence of a promise broken. I share it now not to excuse our decision, but to show you that your education and future were always precious to us, even if our actions ultimately suggested otherwise. The money we set aside for you helped launch your brother's failed business, but the absence of that support launched you toward a future far greater than anything we had imagined for. You, the foundation we're establishing now, is in many ways inspired by your journey. You showed us that the paths to success and fulfillment are far more varied and personal than we had believed. Many young people might thrive, as you have, when given the freedom to forge their own way rather than following conventional routes. I am sorry for the pain our decision caused you. I am endlessly proud of the woman, the leader, the visionary you have become. Not because of our support, but often in spite of its absence. With love and admiration, Mom. By the time I finished reading, tears were flowing freely down my cheeks. The businessman seated next to me politely pretended not to notice, increasing the volume on his headphones. When the plane landed in Austin, I texted my mother a simple message. "Thank you for the journal. It means more than you know." Her reply came quickly. "Thank you for reading it. I've held on to it for too long." As my rideshare navigated the familiar route from the airport to my downtown condo, I gazed out at the Austin skyline, the city that had become my home, the place where I had rebuilt my life and identity after that pivotal betrayal. 5 years ago, my parents had given my college fund to my brother, never expecting what I would achieve without their help. The pain of that decision had propelled me onto a path I would never have chosen voluntarily, a path that had led to greater success, deeper self-knowledge, and more meaningful impact than I could have imagined. The Chen Family Educational Trust would now help other young people navigate their own unconventional journeys, turning our family's story into a legacy of possibility rather than limitation. There was a symmetry to this resolution that felt right, not erasing the past, but transforming it into something that might benefit others facing similar crossroads. As I entered my home, dropping my bags by the door and moving to the floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the city, I felt a sense of completion. The circle that had begun with loss and betrayal had somehow, against all expectations, led to gain and reconciliation. Not perfect, not unmarked by the journey, but whole in its own way. My phone buzzed with a notification from the code-translated team. Our community college expansion had just signed on its 100th student. Another life that might be transformed by access to technical education. Another story beginning where conventional paths had proven insufficient or inaccessible. I smiled, thinking of my younger self, devastated by the loss of her carefully planned future, unaware that the greatest opportunities often arrive disguised as painful setbacks. How could she have known that in losing her college fund, she would find something far more valuable? The courage to create her own definition of success, the determination to build something meaningful from the ground up, and ultimately, the wisdom to transform betrayal into a foundation for greater good? Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.